What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, February 8th, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Except if you're a trader on Wall Street, because it's not been a very good day. The market's just now closing. The Dow went down over 1,000. And it really was accelerating toward the close there, and everybody's trying to find a reason. Bond fears, rate fears, everything, but it looks like the bubble is bursting here. We'll have more about that a little bit later in the show. Meanwhile, our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in the control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And let's get into the news, because there's a lot going on here. And obviously the stock market is a big part of it. But there is a breaking story here regarding uranium-1. Now, you remember a while back there was this story about an FBI informant who had been forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement over at the Department of Justice under then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. And a lot of people said, why did this have to be done? And was it even legal? And as it turned out, it wasn't legal. And finally, the members of Congress have been able to talk to this gentleman. Now, the informant is named Douglas Campbell, and apparently he's not afraid of testifying right now. Apparently he's got cancer. He's just gone through all of these radiation treatments. And it's one thing when you know that you're about to die anyway, all of a sudden, fear of somebody doing something to you sort of goes away. So basically he's out there, and he's already testified before, it's either 3 or 4 different congressional committees talking about the pay for play of uranium-1, and basically saying that Russia hired this public relations firm that they knew could get in touch with Hillary Clinton, and basically were making donations to the Clinton Charitable Foundation to sort of facilitate the uranium-1 deal. Pay for play. It's about as corrupt as you can get. And this informant is out there saying that, this was a very corrupt deal that wound up with Russia acquiring rights to mine 20% of America's uranium ore. Now, of course, Democrats are out there saying, oh, this informant's a liar, he's a kook, he's a nut, he's an alcoholic. But the documentation is all there. The records of the Clinton Foundation show this money coming in from Russian sources, something like $30 million. It's all documented. And so now the Democrats are going to scream about, we have to get rid of his testimony, we have to block it, it's inadmissible. So there's going to be a fight. They're going to try and make this guy's credibility the story rather than what he's saying. But he's providing a lot of details about what was going on. And basically, this guy is out there saying the Obama administration was neck deep in this whole uranium-1 mess. Hillary Clinton was the focus. But apparently, this informant was told that Barack Obama was being briefed on what was going on with the uranium-1 deal. And he knew it was illegal, and he did absolutely nothing. So that one is heating up yet again. Devin Nunes is now out there saying that they have clear proof that it was Hillary Clinton's campaign that colluded with the Russians against Donald Trump. And he was on the Sean Hannity program, and Hannity is saying, you've done a great service. The American people need to know about this, because fundamentally, we had an effort to undermine our election and then undermine an incoming president. And Nunes said, yeah, that's exactly what was going on. They've got the proof. We saw it ourselves, 2016, the way they sabotaged Bernie Sanders. They literally stole the nomination away from him, and then they tried to steal the election for Hillary Clinton, and they came up short. And now it's all coming out. It's coming on out. It's slow but sure. This is all coming out, and the American people are learning a lesson about the kind of characters who seek political power in our nation. Now, do you remember when they were back trying to get that FISA warrant, and they went before the FISA court with one of the dodgy dossiers, the one that came through Fusion GPS, and they also came on in with this story from Yahoo News, which they said corroborates the information in the Fusion GPS dossier. Well, it didn't really, because Christopher Steele was the source for both the dossier and the Yahoo article. And it turns out that the author of the Yahoo News article that was held aloft as corroboration was secretly working with the Democratic National Committee. And this was revealed in an email published by WikiLeaks. And basically it said that Michael Isikoff, who was the author of the Yahoo News article, was secretly working with the DNC. So it's just it's a conspiracy, is exactly what it is. It was a conspiracy to overthrow a sitting president. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Judicial Watch, once again, has had to sue the Department of Justice because the Department of Justice is refusing to honor a Freedom of Information Act request. And basically, Judicial Watch is saying the American people have a right to see how the Obama administration justified spying on the Trump team. And we do. We do have a right to see exactly what was going on, just as we had a right to learn how Richard Nixon was spying on all those Democrats during Watergate. Remember, those people in government, they work for us. We're their bosses. They are our employees, and they have no right, first of all, to cheat the game, and second of all, to use the instruments of our government to keep us from finding out. Now, Tom Fitton is basically unleashing on Obama amid the new FBI text message firestorm, which seems to indicate that Obama was directly linked in with the FBI's operation to exonerate Hillary Clinton. And Tom Fitton is saying FISA wasn't the only way the Obama gang spied on Trump. And apparently he is correct, because a story out of Citizen Free Press is saying that more than 100 Trump campaign ads and associates were unmasked and surveilled. This is now becoming a Watergate-sized scandal. And there's a lot more coming on out. Now, the other day we were talking about the fact that, given the fact that the FISA warrant was obtained fraudulently, the FISA judge should have by now issued a statement rescinding the warrant and declaring it invalid. Hasn't happened. What's going on? Well, it turns out there are 11 judges on the FISA court, 10 of whom were appointed by Barack Obama, including the judge who had to recuse himself after the Michael Flynn plea. Also including the Judge Rudolph Contreras that granted the FISA warrant after another judge rejected it. They just kept going on back until they got a judge who would go along with this thing. So basically, at this point, Fox News is reporting what we already knew or presumed to be true. Obama did know what was going on. Obama knew that the FBI was planning to exonerate Hillary Clinton and her email server, and we know why Obama was involved. Now, publicly he said he wasn't going to get involved in the investigation, but these text messages prove he was being briefed on a daily basis as to what was going on. And by the way, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, they actually got bonuses when the investigation was over into Hillary Clinton's email server. Job well done. You know, we got her off the hook. Here's some extra money. So Obama knew. Now, the reason I think Obama was heavily involved in this and probably was ultimately calling the shots, it came on out that contrary to Obama's claim that he didn't know anything about the illegal email server until it was reported on the TV news, it turns out that using a pseudonym, he had been communicating with Hillary Clinton through that weak private email server, including the transmission of classified information, which means that Barack Obama himself was in violation of provisions of Title 18, the same as Hillary. If Hillary went down for Title 18, Obama would follow her. Now, as you know, it has come on out that there was a second dossier claiming to have damaging information on Donald Trump, and I guess they wanted to have multiple dossiers to make it look like these were independent, verifiable sources, but they all track back to the Democrats. They all track back to the Clinton campaign. Excuse me. They all track back to Clinton associates as the source of this information, and Clinton money paid for it all. And a lot of people are now starting to look at Clinton confidant Sidney Blumenthal as a source for that second Trump dossier. His name keeps popping up over and over again. And a lot of people were very concerned that Blumenthal was feeding information for an FBI investigation on the Trump campaign. And the Washington Post Tuesday reported that Christopher Steele gave the FBI a report in October 2016 that he received from a State Department employee about Trump and Russia. And now it's looking like that information was coming from the Clinton campaign from Sidney Blumenthal. And there's a lot of names in there. What the process is called is data laundering. It's like money laundering. You want to get a piece of data someplace, but you don't want it to be obvious where it came from. So you'll pass it off to this person, who passes it off to that person, who sends it over to this person, who sends it over to that person, to build up this huge multi-layered chain. So you don't know really where it originated, only where you're being told it came from. So the Guardian is basically coming on up saying that this second dossier was compiled by Cody Shearer, who the Guardian identifies as a controversial political activist and former journalist who was close to the Clinton White House in the 1990s. And I kept hearing the name over and over again. So apparently he's the one who put this together and then gave it to Sidney Blumenthal to take over to somebody at the State Department, blah, 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 blah. That's how this is all coming on out. But it's all a bunch of lies. Now, Louis Gohmert is basically saying it's time for a release of the transcripts of the hearing before the FISA judge where the FISA warrant was granted to see what, if any, falsehoods were being made by the presenters to the court. And basically saying that if anybody lied to that judge, and we know they were, that this could mean 6 months in jail for Obama officials. Now, this comes out of the category of rats leaving a sinking ship. David Laufman is a federal prosecutor, and in 2014 he became the chief of the National Security Division's Counterintelligence and Export Control Section. And he was the man who helped oversee the probe of Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server and the supposed Russian interference in the 2016 election. He has now resigned. He's getting out of Dodge. He's abandoning the sinking ship. He's saying he's leaving for personal reasons, meaning he wants to be as far away from Washington, D.C. as he can when the bovine excrement hits the ventilation system. And we're going to see a lot more of these mid-level players. They know how these things happen. The people at the top, the people who are the real criminals, they'll save themselves by throwing underlings under the bus. And this guy obviously doesn't want a tread mark on his forehead, so he's getting out of Dodge as fast as he can. Another little comment found in the FBI texts. We were telling the other day about the comment about people who refused to vote for Andrew McCabe's wife were dumb hillbillies. Well, apparently a comment directed at Bernie Sanders supporters. Stupid, blank, I'm sorry, they're idiots. Just a complete and utter disdain for anybody who's not in their elite little circle. Now, of course, extreme arrogance is actually almost part of the FBI's corporate culture. Each of these intelligence agencies, they sort of have their own culture, if you will. And the FBI tends to be arrogant and bullying. CIA prides itself on formal politeness and honorifics. NSA, of course, that's the geek squad. And so forth and so on. Now, About a month ago, there was an article that ran commenting on the fact that the judge in the Imran Awan case, and this judge was appointed by Barack Obama, keeps delaying this trial over and over and over again. It keeps vanishing from the court docket. This has been going on for 5 months. And so people are asking, why does this Obama crony judge keep postponing the trial? Are they just trying to open up a window where he can flee to Pakistan, where his co-defendant and wife have already left with the blessing of the FBI? She was allowed to leave. She didn't even sneak out. Now, the current trial date is set someplace in March. This is something like 5 or 6 continuances. And this U.S. District Court Judge, Tanya Chutkan, is basically preventing this from ever going to trial. You have to ask why. Well, obviously, I have a theory. Now, you already know that I suspect that Hillary Clinton was running an espionage operation out of the State Department, selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak private email server to deliver the material and her charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. We also know that one of the reasons Imran Awan is in serious trouble is that his little IT company that got the contract to maintain computers in the Capitol building was caught hacking into the computers of members of Congress. So there was a little spying going on there. And we know that Debbie Wasserman Schultz kept Imran Awan on the payroll even after he had been stripped of his security clearance to work on the computers. She didn't let him go until the day that he was arrested trying to leave the country. So we have an espionage case suspected over in the State Department, and we have a suspected espionage operation going on in the Capitol building. What if they're both part of the same operation? What if Hillary was getting information not just from, well, there's the idea. Where was Hillary getting the information she was selling? From State Department files, certainly. But what if the Democrats, what if Debbie Wasserman Schultz was having Imran Awan pillage the computers of members of Congress and forwarding that information to Hillary to sell? I think it's a distinct possibility, and I think it's time that somebody gets in and finds out just what was going on with all those computers and private email servers and the information that was flowing through them. Story coming out of Global Research in California suggesting, and I agree, that Russiagate should be called Hillarygate because there is no Russian collusion with Donald Trump. It was Hillary. Hillary was colluding with Russia, supposedly to build these dossiers, if we're to believe what the Clinton people are saying, and certainly with the Uranium One deal. There's the collusion. So no Russiagate investigation was warranted in terms of the Trump-Russia collusion. There never should have been a special counsel. The way Mueller was appointed was in direct violation of the normal procedures for a special counsel. There's supposed to be a regular internal Department of Justice investigation. If that investigation finds evidence a crime has taken place of sufficient magnitude to warrant a special counsel, then one is appointed. Didn't work that way. Rod Rosenstein simply tapped Robert Mueller on the shoulder and said, "Go get Trump for us." Maybe we need a Schiffgate investigation, looking at some of the ways he's been trying to obstruct and block what's going on. But I think a lot of people, well, we got to take a break for commercials. I have an opinion when we come on back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I think a lot of people, and I'm one of them, we're thrilled that the government is starting to acknowledge that we here in the independent media were right all along. You know, we're very happy that we're not simply being dismissed as a bunch of tinfoil hat-wearing, conspiracy, wacko, kook, crazy people. But I think now a lot of people are saying, okay, We were right. This stuff's been going on. And now the government is admitting it's going on. What's next? Where are the arrests? Where are the indictments? We don't need to do any more investigating. We've already got these people dead to rights on these criminal actions. Even former FBI Director James Comey admitted Hillary Clinton had violated several sections of Title 18. Let's stop digging here. Let's start the arrests and start the process of getting them into the court, getting their day in court. And so there is this article that came on out of WorldNet Daily that's saying the same thing. It's time for the public to wake up and demand that either our Attorney General snap out of his cowardly malaise or seek employment elsewhere. And if Sessions continues to refuse to do his job, the president would be totally justified in moving him to a Justice Department field office, maybe someplace down there in South Florida, in the swamp. And get somebody in that job who's going to do the job, somebody like Larry Klayman or Tom Fitton. Because we're tired of waiting. I have been waiting for justice to be done for almost a quarter of a century. I'm getting to be an old guy. I'd like to see it happen. It's on my bucket list. Hillary in prison. But it's infuriating, as well as being educational, to see just how many people in the federal government, what overwhelming majority percentage of people in that federal government are part of this web of corruption and looking out for each other. I'm sure you probably remember when you were going to high school, there was always the elite group of young kids who came from family money, and they were always getting away with things, and they would lie for each other. The cliques, the socias, whatever they're called today. And it would be infuriating because you knew what they were doing and how they were behaving. But nothing ever happened to them because they were always looking out for each other and lying to cover each other, and nothing could be done. This is exactly the same thing, grown up. Washington, D.C. is a giant clique of people who think they are automatically superior, who have this unshakable sense of entitlement to other people's money, no sense of morality, no sense of ethics, just this idea of just the object is to win no matter what. To heck with the rules, to heck with whoever we've got to kill. Just winning is everything. Winning the next round of funding, winning the next election, winning the popularity contest. It's all about self-aggrandizement. The evidence is out there to start putting some of these people in jail. And the sooner you start the prosecutions, the sooner you're going to get people who will panic and say, I am willing to become state's evidence. Now, I understand that from the GOP point of view, it is advantageous for them to draw this out over the next several months, leading toward the midterm elections in November. But there are times when I do get impatient about this. Okay, now, latest bizarre story coming on out. Apparently, Eric Holder has been asked if he was thinking about running for president in 2020, and he says he won't rule it out. Then he apparently followed on later by saying that James Comey made a mistake criticizing Clinton. So here we have another Clintonista who wants to protect Hillary Clinton and the deep state and the CIA's gun and drug running, and he's throwing his hat in the ring for 2020. Obviously not somebody that any sane person should consider voting for or supporting. Now, the other day we were talking about how Adam Schiff got pranked by these Russian comedians who called him and said they were aware that there were some nude photos of Donald Trump floating around, photos that had been taken in Russia. And Adam Schiff bought it, hook, line, and sinker, and sicked his entire staff. Hunt these pictures down. And not only was it unethical for him to basically compromise himself that way, it revealed that his vendetta against Trump is leading him to make bad decisions. He lacks a certain amount of common sense. And now the Republicans are saying it's time for him to step down. He's clearly not competent if he got suckered this easy. And yeah, there's an issue of competency here. And not just with him. A while back, Maxine Waters got pranked by Russian comedians. They were out there talking about how the Russians had rigged the elections in Limpopo. And Waters promised to lend assistance to the opposed president of Limpopo, which is a fairy tale kingdom that doesn't really exist. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to talk about the war zones because that's still going on out there. It's not getting a lot of coverage here in the U.S. corporate media. Of course, everybody's gearing up for the Olympics, which starts tomorrow morning with the opening ceremonies. But there's a lot going on in Syria, and it looks like the U.S. and Israel are deliberately trying to escalate that conflict. We have this ridiculous contrivance of thinking by the United States, which claims that because they have invaded and occupied somebody else's country where they are not wanted, that they have a right to defend themselves by preemptively attacking the armed forces of that country. Now, of course, that's nonsense. When you invade somebody else's country, you're committing an act of war, and getting shot at is something that you have to expect is going to happen. Meanwhile, of course, Israel once again carried out a missile attack against Damascus from inside Lebanese airspace. So they're still cranking it up. The U.S. doesn't want to admit that they've lost. And they've been in Syria for all these years. They haven't been able to pull it off, getting rid of Assad. But as long as Congress is going to give the military more of your money, they're going to go on bombing these people who have done nothing wrong to us. Nobody can point to anything Syria has done as being in any way, shape, or form a threat to this country. It is simply the U.S. going on out and being aggressive just to be aggressive for financial reasons, for control of oil, for control of territory. Story coming out of, well, I don't actually have the source for this one again, but apparently Syrian hospitals are again being deliberately targeted. Rebels in the northern Idlib province and eastern Ghouta near Syria's capital Damascus are being hit with airstrikes despite mounting Western and UN pressure for a truce. And apparently they're hitting hospitals again, which is a war crime, by the way. Okay, so U.S.-led coalition struck Syrian army in Deir ez-Zor. And, of course, this happened yesterday, and this is the attack that I was talking about, where the United States went on out and bombed these people and called it an act of self-defense. Now, that, of course, is completely and utterly ridiculous. The United States has no reason to be there. There's been no declaration of war by Congress. There is no Security Council resolution at the United Nations. The United States has no legal basis for being in Syria. The Syrian government doesn't want them there. The Russians don't want them there. Now the Turks don't want them there either. And apparently in this attack, the U.S. killed somewhere around 100 Syrian soldiers, claiming self-defense. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. The U.S. is in somebody else's country without that country's government's permission. And then you just haul off and attack the military forces and say, oh, they made us do it, Mommy. It was self-defense. Really, we had no choice. It's utterly absurd. Now, the other day we were talking about the huge cost of the war in Afghanistan. And we have been there for a very, very long time. And do you realize that the money spent on the war in Afghanistan just so far this year could end U.S. homelessness twice over? This is according to an article in Activist Post. Something that a lot of people really don't understand or appreciate is how expensive war is, how expensive military procurement is. And I got to see it when I was, first of all, working with NASA, and then later on when I was working with Robert Abel and Associates, and we actually landed a contract to provide some graphics for a demonstration of a concept for the Strategic Defense Initiative. And it's amazing. Normal human beings, like you and I, Claire, everybody, when we talk about money, we're talking about an eyedropper. And just a drop of water here for the electric bill, and a drop of water here for the mortgage payment, and a drop of water here for medical bills. The military have got fire hoses. It's just huge, vast sums of money going in there, and it is very wasteful. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Let's start with James in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mike. I was just curious about some factors, some facts about the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. And one thing I found that I had no idea about is that all the judges, all 11 of the judges now serving, were appointed by Chief Justice John Roberts. Now, I don't know if there's any kind of oversight or how they're nominated or anything like that, but they were all appointed by John Roberts.
Well, that directly contradicts the story that we had earlier in our program, where 10 of the 11 judges were appointed by Barack Obama.
Well, now they were all serving judges on various federal courts before being appointed to the FISA court.
Okay.
Now they were appointed to the federal courts by Barack Obama. I think most of them, at least. I think there were a couple of them may have preceded him. But the actual appointment to the FISA courts were all 11 of them were made by Chief Justice Roberts.
Okay. But I'm sure those 10 judges are still feeling an obligation toward Barack Obama. And we know that Judge Roberts himself may have been spied on and compromised because of the way that he did that about-face on the Obamacare case when that went before the Supreme Court.
I was going to bring that up myself.
Yeah, he was opposed, and all of a sudden at the last minute turns around and says, yeah, it's okay under the Commerce Clause. And then he left town, went on vacation to Malta for a week to dodge the press firestorm.
Yeah. But that seems like here's the entire FISA court is basically in the pocket of one man. That's a bit worrisome.
It is worrisome, and it explains why the judge who issued the FISA warrant to spy on Trump and associates has not said it's invalid. It's the fruit of a poison tree.
Yeah, well, there's going to be increasing pressure to review that decision, to release the transcripts at least.
Yeah,
and to review that decision. So what happens is to be seen.
Well, that's why Gomert, I think, wants those the transcripts of the FISA hearing. But the judge himself, on learning that the dossier that was used to argue for the warrant was itself fraudulent, the judge at any time has the latitude to say the warrant is invalid, and it's hereby rescinded. Right. It just takes the judge issuing a judge's order saying the warrant is invalid.
Yeah. Well, I just thought I'd let you know what how the FISA court was, how it was set up and how judges are chosen, and it's like I say, it's not exactly comforting to know that everyone's picked out by one person.
Well, I think it's more significant that 10 of those 11 judges received their judgeships from Obama, because I'm sure they're feeling very loyal to him. And again, this whole mess that's been brought up against Donald Trump, all we find behind it are Clinton and Obama cronies just pushing it along. Anyway, James, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Steve Elkins. Steve, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, I was doing a little reading last night, and I started putting some things together, and I was going to throw it by you here, but I started thinking about the involvement from Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General.
Yes.
And looking back, he was appointed by George W. Bush and continued on with the Obama administration, and then Trump kept him on, which he probably shouldn't have done. Should have cleaned house and brought his own people in. But I got this funny suspicion that, of course, we understand that Rosenstein had whispered in Trump's ear to get rid of James Comey. And I think when he did that, I think he's working for the other side here. And that when he did that, he also helped the other side with now their obstruction of justice on this collusion with Russia. I think he's working on their side there. And of course, they put a lackey in there for the FBI director. Christopher Wray's a lackey. He's nothing. He's worth nothing. Mm-hmm. I got a funny suspicion Rod Rosenstein's playing a bigger part in this whole thing of working on the other side.
Okay, when you say he's working on the other side, I know that you know what you mean. Who do you think he's really working for?
I think he's working for the DNC. I think he's working for the conspirators on this whole phony Russian dossier. I think he's working for he's not looking after. He's not doing his job, first of all. But I think he planted that seed in Trump's mind to get rid of Comey, which he had every right to do because Comey was not doing his job. The AG wasn't doing her job, Loretta Lynch, so she had to go. Comey had to go because they weren't doing their jobs. So he had every right to do that. But I think he was also fueling this whole thing now of saying there's an obstruction of justice here because that's why he got rid of James Comey. I think he's trying to help the cause for the conspirators on this one.
Well, I wouldn't put it past him, but again, you're absolutely right. The president has the right to fire anybody for any reason or no reason whatsoever. And we know that Rod Rosenstein is working for the other side because of the very bizarre way he appointed Robert Mueller to be a special counsel. Rosenstein broke the rules. He didn't follow the procedure that you're supposed to follow. He just tapped Robert Mueller and said, go get Trump.
Yeah. Another thing here, you mentioned that there's no morals and no ethics. I would add, I agree with that 100%, but I would add, I think these conspirators, these Democrats who are going on this Russia conspiracy, could also say that their motto would be the ends justify the means. They don't care. As long as they can get this guy out, get Donald Trump out, the ends justify the means. So find as much as they can find or just make up or manufacture to get him out of office. But that's kind of where I look at that. Is the ends justify the means is probably their motto.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, and not just for the Democrats. I think it's something that all politicians will tend to follow. Anybody who's trying to climb in society, and they'll step on people on their way up and try and avoid them on the way back down. That's a common attitude you find in people who are just lusting after more money and power. The ends will justify the means. It's a gross self-deception, but it also comes out of that war mindset where to win is imperative and it doesn't matter how.
Right. That's it, Mike. Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch over to HB in FEMA Region 4. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. We talk about all this stuff all the time, and you've talked about it before, the War Powers Act of, what was it, 1939 or something like that?
Yes.
So they've kind of suspended the Constitution since then. Do you think that's what they're using to not go by the Constitution? And let me hang this in there with it. Why come Trump hasn't done anything about getting our troops out of NATO command? I thought that was treason to put our troops in charge and somebody else in charge of our troops. Couldn't he rescind that with executive order and the NDAA too?
Well, first of all, it's not treason if you put U.S. troops under foreign commanders who are on your side. And it's hardly the first time that it's been done. During the American Revolution, there were American soldiers who operated under the command of General Lafayette, who was an ally.
So who's on our side? The UN? Is that who you were calling on our side? I don't think they're on our side.
Well, the UN is not supposed to be on anybody's side, but NATO definitely is supposed to be on the side of its member nations. Although at the moment we have NATO nations fighting each other, which proves NATO doesn't work anymore.
I just don't like it. I don't like anything about it. And I don't know why Trump can't rescind that NDAA. That's totally unconstitutional.
Well, the NDAA is basically a bill that's passed by Congress, and Trump can't rescind it. All he could do is veto it, but apparently he didn't do that.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. One more thing, then I'll let you go. You mentioned something yesterday about there being a plane at the Pentagon on 9/11.
Yes.
Have you seen the plane there at the Pentagon?
No, the FBI grabbed all the videos from the security cameras in the region, and then they planted that story about no plane at the Pentagon to try and make anybody who questioned the official story of 9/11 look like an idiot.
But there wasn't a plane at the Pentagon, from what I gathered when we first started seeing the pictures.
Well, you have to look at the eyewitness statement. Look at the eyewitness statements. I mean, hundreds of people saw the plane flying toward the Pentagon, and there should, in theory, be an equal number of witnesses who saw it flying away if it did not, in fact, hit the Pentagon. And
they also told us that we saw 2 jets fly into the trade towers too. I don't believe that.
Well, thank you very much for your unique, interesting perspective on the story, and we're going to let you go and switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Francis, are you there?
Hello.
Okay.
I hope you're still there. Hello to you both. I love that about Region 4, FEMA Region 4, that is. That was a good one. 2 brief things. One about the military spending and so forth. I know that Ron Paul a few years back made a comment or trying to get legislated about having the Federal Reserve audited, as it were, which basically fell through like a lead balloon or whatever. It just didn't go anywhere, which was a good idea. But I'm wondering if perhaps it would have been better to have an audit done of the military-industrial complex instead, or a combination thereof, let alone the pharmaceutical industrial complex, as a threefold deal, for that matter. Now, as for the thing about the FISA memo and all that kind of good stuff, I hear the whole commentary about going back to Hillary, going back to Obama, and so forth.
Francis, Francis, I'm sorry to cut you off. We got to take a break for commercials. Stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Francis in North Carolina, and I'm in agreement. The Federal Reserve ought to be audited, but every time somebody suggests a full audit of the Federal Reserve drops dark hints about the economy collapsing entirely. And every time anybody talks about auditing the Defense Department, they come on back and say, well, you know, a lot of our money is spent on black projects and secret stuff, and we really can't have that out in public. They don't want accountability. And it's the same thing when somebody says it's time for another audit of the gold in Fort Knox. There's always a reason not to. And it's basically it's part of this culture of trying to keep the American people from finding out what's really been going on. And I think the reason is obvious why the Federal Reserve doesn't want an audit. They don't want the American people to learn just how much real wealth the owners of the Federal Reserve have extracted from the labor of the American people using nothing more than colored ink and paper and numbers in a computer.
Pretty much. It's what you call, you don't want the truth to get out about what you've been doing behind the back and stabbing people in the same time. As far as on the flip side, as far as the FISA memo and all that kind of good stuff is concerned, if I recall correctly, when the Shrub Jr. had gone into his first term of administration and so forth, and instilled what is called the Patriot Act, if I recall correctly, the FISA court, the FISA memos and all that was instigated at that time occurred or was brought about or started at that time. Now, the question is, obviously each DOJ, regardless of what administration comes into play, are going to either yay or nay about what is going to be allowed or not allowed to be done. So the question is, This could go even far back than even Hillary, Obama, or whoever cleaned back up the Trump Jr. So the question is how far back they want to dig. Or do they really want to dig that far back?
Well, nobody wants to dig back that far, and certainly the Clintons don't want us digging back to what was going on in Arkansas in the 1980s. Now, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act was actually passed in 1978, quite a bit before 9/11, so it wasn't a response to that. And basically...
Well,
yeah, basically it was to allow to give the illusion of some kind of judicial review to intelligence agencies who were spying on foreigners. The problem is that, as the name suggests, the FISA court only has jurisdiction outside the borders of the United States. But as we are learning now, FISA is weasel-wording around the law to try and grant access to spy on the American people.
Imagine that. Well, the thing is, it's amazing how many things were set up legally to be taking place well before 9/11 ever occurred to start with, and what kind of a funky wave of a web they have created that's collapsing now. So the thing, to me, is a matter of collapse on.
I agree.
Have a good one. Later.
I absolutely agree here. Thank you very much. Okay, we're coming up here on our station identification. We got another caller waiting on the line. I'm going to wait until we come back from our station break for that. But Lawrence Wilkerson was chief of staff to former Secretary of State Colin Powell and helped craft the Pentagon, or the propaganda that said war with Iraq is the only option we've got. And now is out there saying the same propaganda is being written about Iran. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, one of your previous callers kept saying the DNC. I'm going to say it one more time. George Bush himself come out yesterday and says he's for open borders, and he blames Russia for getting involved in our elections. He's a globalist. His family's a globalist. The Clintons are global. When are people going to understand this is not a DNC/RNC issue? It's the same crap going on in the EU. It's globalism versus nationalism. That is it. These people are for open borders, just like over there. Therefore, you're not allowed to be independent. That's what they're for. They want everybody to be pushed into one group so they can control them easier, outsource your jobs, control you. That's what this is about. Not a DNC issue or RNC issue. Now, sure, there's pockets of people against it, but our country, I hate to break it to these people, but your country's a globalist country. It's an empire. It's part of a larger empire of the EU. It's all linked. Australia, Canada, not everybody in Australia and Canada, but those elements in control. That's what Trump is up against. You know, not saying he's his own oligarchy, or his group, but that's what he's up against. He's up against the powers that be that don't want things changed. It's a status quo. And we're headed for a showdown sooner rather than later. I don't know, Mike. I just don't understand. With that in the stock market, Mike, I just see bad things on the horizon.
Well, yeah, that part I would definitely agree with here. As far as the globalist versus nationalist, the globalist agenda is starting to fracture. We're seeing that especially in Europe, where all of these globalist leaders are being voted out of office, and all these pro-sovereignty Eurosceptics are being voted in their place. Now we've got a situation where Brussels is having to threaten military action against member states of the EU for refusing to take in any more refugees. And when you start acting like that, it's only a matter of time before some of these countries are just going to say, we're seceding, we're out of here. We didn't join this European Union to be threatened by Brussels to do things which are not in our member states' best interest.
Am I switching gears on Iran?
Okay.
Russia used their bases to have some airstrikes against the U.S. terrorists. Now, why don't they have a permanent base in Iran and also make a deal with them to sell them the S-400s immediately because Turkey's on Iran's side. So because there's no way the U.S. is going to – an attack on Iran would be an attack on Russia and Turkey. They're not going to attack Iran then. Iran's enough, it's hard enough nut to crack by itself. But if you got S-400s there and Turkey also, it's going to be like pretty much impossible without starting like a world war, which,
that's where we're
some
headed.
People want in this country.
That's where we're headed. That's where our the military-industrial complex wants a world war because they make a lot of money. The bankers want a new world war because they make a lot of money. And they don't care how many people are going to be killed and crippled. And they don't care if cities on both sides get blown up because that's just more opportunities to give out more loans at interest to rebuild. And it's just this huge, bloody, gigantic scam that gets played on the human race time after time after time.
And, Mike, I want to go back to the economy real quick on the
Sure.
stock market. If people have the ability to get out of it, you might want to do it because, we talked about this yesterday about we used to have savings rates,
Yes.
but you can't use the stock market as a way of making, like, money long term. It's like going to a casino. We talked about that, playing roulette. You win one day, and you're going to lose it all the next. So you people better, whoever has money in the stock market, better think twice about keeping it in there because this is a couple days now of this. It's unstable. It's unstable because it's a Ponzi scheme and it's rigged.
Well, there's a lot of rigging going on. It is a Ponzi scheme. The volatility is driven by these high-frequency computer trades, plus the fact that most brokers prefer volatility because it gives them more peaks and valleys to ride the straddle and make money with these very, very rapid trades. And it's just drifted so far away from the original purpose of having a stock market. It is a giant open-air casino, and unfortunately, the house has got the advantage. And unless you have grown up with these people and you've got the golf club contacts to share information, there's a lot of cheating and fraud going on in Wall Street, and it's simply nothing's being done about it.
And remember, the regular person, the Joe six-pack, will be
Yes.
the last to know when to pull out.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
if you're not pulled out yet, man, yeah, you're in for a world of hurt for this. I mean, we're in Thursday now, and this has been going on since Friday. So it's unstable, and I would share people that pull their money out and just, find something of real value, of tangible. I keep saying gold, silver, whatever you can afford, and hunker down.
Absolutely.
That's it, Mike.
And,
all right, thanks, Mike.
Well, thank you, Dustin, for the call right now. Obviously, if you have risk capital, and by that I mean never go into debt to invest in anything. But if you have risk capital, I would say right now, because they're still trying to keep the price of gold and silver down to make it look like they're not attractive, now's the time to get on in. Just buy it in small amounts so that there's less of a record being kept, and keep it under your own control. Because remember, a couple of years ago, Congress actually passed laws making it legal for the banks to go into your safety deposit box if they get into trouble. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So we were talking about Lawrence Wilkerson. He was Chief of Staff to former Secretary of State Colin Powell. And ever since he's left the government, he's become an outspoken critic of our foreign policy. And when he was working for Colin Powell, he helped craft the propaganda that war was the only possible choice in dealing with Iraq. And Lawrence is now sounding the warning that he's seeing the same thing being done all over for Iran, not to mention North Korea, Russia, and China. They're bad, they're evil. The only possible choice we have is war. And we should heed his warning that we're being set up again. We're being lied to again. And then Lawrence Wilkerson went on to say, the United States are the death merchant of the world, And basically, it's corporate interests that are driving these wars. Oil companies, banks, weapons makers. And he says he thinks Smedley Butler was onto something. Now, if you don't know what the reference is about, Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler was a very popular military commander, and he was actually approached by the bankers to help lead the military side of a planned banker coup against Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And after Smedley Butler got enough information, he blew the whistle in Congress. The whole thing was hushed up and didn't really get declassified until sometime in the 70s here. But Smedley Butler is also famous for a booklet that he wrote after he retired from military service. And while he was in military service, he obeyed his orders, he never questioned, and that's why he rose so high, at very high rank. But in this pamphlet, it was called War is a Racket. And he basically said, that's all that we ever did. When I was in the Marine Corps, we went on out and made other countries safe for American business interests. And that's exactly what's going on right now. Now, another reason the Pentagon doesn't want an audit is because then they'd be forced to admit that a lot of things have gone missing, a lot of money's gone missing, and apparently over in Iraq, the United States had provided 9 Abrams tanks to Iraqi forces for the battle against Islamic State. And apparently these tanks are now in the hands of the Iranian-backed Hashd al-Shabi militias. That's $81 million worth of hardware that just got somehow misplaced. Now, as you know, tensions are building between Israel and Lebanon, and part of the problem is that Israel wants to build a new border security wall. Unfortunately, they want to build it on Lebanese land. Apparently, Israel's idea is we need this security wall, but why should we give up our land for it? And so Beirut is threatening to confront Israel over this plan to build a wall on Lebanese land. And this is another attempt by Israel to provoke Lebanon, because we know they want that Litani River. They know they want more of that land. And the problem with Israel's military adventurism is it always seems to involve U.S. forces. And there are U.S. forces on the ground in Israel right now, ostensibly for a drill. But it really doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, speaking of drills, apparently the U.S. Army and the Marine Corps are planning to roll out cold weather gear for American ground forces. They're going to be training for sub-zero combat, meaning war in the Arctic, war with Russia, war with North Korea. And you need to understand, it has now become known that there is a lot of oil and gas underneath the Arctic Ocean. And as the easily reachable oil on the ground continues to decline, these deep reserves of oil are looking more and more attractive, the Deepwater Horizon disaster notwithstanding. So the U.S. and Russia are both trying to project power into the Arctic and claim big chunks of it. Russia, of course, has the advantage in cold weather shipping because they've been doing it for a long time. But there could literally be war at the top of the world. It was kind of interesting that we're running the movie Ice Station Zebra on TV over this last week as well. It's amazing. Okay, another story. This one's coming out of The Nation. It says, Pentagon readies the father of all bombs for use against North Korea. I knew we had a mother of all bombs. I guess now we have a father of all bombs, and I guess they're going to breed them and make child bombs or something. But they're getting ready to use this against North Korea. And they're talking about preventive attacks on the North Korean nuclear and missile facilities. Now, of course, there's a problem. First, a U.S. attack could provoke massive retaliation by North Korea against South Korea and Japan, producing vast numbers of civilian casualties. And second, and this is the sticking point for me, that they could fail to destroy all of the North's nuclear and missile facilities. And I'm sure by now Kim Jong-un has dispersed this stuff everywhere, all across the country. He's not going to be as dumb as to put it all in one big pile, which is the mistake they made with the heavy aircraft down here at Pearl Harbor. He's not that dumb. He's not going to do that. This is absolutely insane. Now, tomorrow morning are the opening ceremonies of the Olympic Games in South Korea, and obviously there is a concern that something might happen that will be blamed on North Korea, and the war will be off and running. Okay, let's take a phone call from Nick in England. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I was just wanting to carry on with the theme that Justin was just talking about at the beginning of his call, about this being, the globalist and nationalist thing being international, and it's playing out so clearly in the UK at the moment. I just the front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning, I saw it this morning, and it just completely ruined my day. There's a huge picture of the one and only George Soros himself. That he's just donated a large amount of money to an organisation called Best for Britain, and they're just backing a campaign to overturn Brexit. And he was at the end of January. This report was that he's got this, really nice house in Chelsea when he's over in the UK, and he had a whole load of backers to the Conservative Party. And they've got this, and the paper got hold of a leaked document, which is, their guerrilla tactics for basically pushing to, push for a second referendum and target Conservative MPs and all MPs who were elected in districts which voted to leave, to put a lot of pressure on them, and this is they're going to have a whole range of billboard advertising and events focused on the youth, concerts, rallies, the whole 9 yards. And it's designed to raise public support for a clear and growing national majority by the summer, to pressure MPs into voting, to getting rid of the democratic will of the people, and that they realise they have clearly got total contempt for democracy, and he says in this piece here that he's a campaigner for open society and democracy. But I appreciate and understand that he's a fully paid up globalist, but I understand that to some degree. But if you look at it on the outside, you got to say, well, what on earth's it got to do with him? He's just some rich guy. How dare he try and go and influence the politics of another country? If it's wrong for Russia to go in and, try and get involved in American politics, so why is it okay for some guy who's based in America to come and do that in England? And I just wish the Americans, somebody in America, there must be so much there must be so much evidence to arrest him in the States for all he's done and all the violence in the States after Trump got elected. It would just be wonderful if he was. It would be wonderful if he was. I know it's a long ask, but if his association with this organization could be made to appear less than savory by him being seen as a criminal, it just turns my stomach. It really does. It's just. Who are these people? How dare they do this kind of thing? Well,
that's exactly right. But you're correct. The globalist agenda is basically one planet, one government, so that they can do whatever they want, and there are no alternatives. There's no frontier to escape to. There are no other countries where you can go and get a better treatment from the government than where you are. And obviously, a global government will not hesitate to become the most oppressive system in history. And the idea is to simply maximize the amount of work product coming out of the population for the benefit of the royals and the elites. And you're absolutely right. It is not appropriate for anybody to go into another country where they're not a citizen and use their money and influence to try and change the politics. Now, the reason this group that Soros gave this money to is targeting concerts and other events. They've discovered an interesting demographic reality, and that is that the British people who are older remember what Britain was like before the EU and before the migrant crisis, and they want to go back to the way things were before. The younger generation, all they've ever known is being part of the EU and seeing the migrants around, and they're more willing to go along with remaining in the EU, and that's why they're trying to court them as a new political force.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these youngsters, they seem to think that if we pull out of the EU, that they won't be able to travel to France and go to Germany on holiday and do stuff. I mean, it's completely, it's just detached from reality, so much of it. But I was wondering, what do you, in your opinion, I mean, I've been listening aghast to your commentaries recently about what's going on.
Nick, I got to put you on hold. We got to take a break for commercials. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And for those of you who would like to help keep Republic Broadcasting on the air, the address where you can send a check or money order is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas 78664. And if you'd like to phone on in and pledge to be a recurring subscriber, that number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And folks, we really need your help because we are heading into what could be a major battle with the deep state. They're going to try and find ways that they can silence us. They're probably already hiring people to call into the show and try and revive old kookiness like No Plane at the Pentagon or chemtrails or fake Apollo moon landings or that stuff. And we need our resources to keep getting the message on out there. And we wouldn't ask if we didn't need it. Okay, let's go on back here to Nick in England. Nick, you were about to ask me a question, what I thought about something, so please take it away.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Just very quickly, just a final comment about George Soros. The Hungarian government have sussed him out. They've worked out who he is. And last time I was in Budapest, there were posters everywhere of him as a puppet master.
Yes,
which I thought was very brilliant. But I just wanted to. Seeing this relentless machine of the elite who instill Project Fear into us, you almost thought that if we dared to vote to leave Brexit, that King Kong would come and start walking around London and smash into Big Ben. I mean, it was so ludicrous. And that same machine is now, out there pulling out all the stops. And it's very depressing to see that all day. When you see that people like us, we've got to fight to have our democratically will instilled, and I personally don't think that we're going to be allowed to leave, or if we are, the Brexit won't be worth the paper it's written on. But my question to you is that I'm really interested in your opinion. That I've been listening to you in the last few days talking about, this revealing the extraordinary level of corruption in the States and the FISA warrant and all the implications of that. It is quite extraordinary. And my question to you is to what degree do you think that the UK is as fundamentally and deeply corrupt as Washington is? Do you think that they're comparable or similar? I personally think that there's a machine there, the elite, that won't allow us, that is trying to very, very hard to stop us from leaving. And I just wondered what your take on the level of behind-the-scenes machinations that go on here as opposed to the States.
Well, my understanding is that all governments are corrupt to an extent, and I'm not in a position to be able to say how corrupt the government of Great Britain is, although very obviously when it comes to the issue of Brexit and the EU, there is a great deal of corruption. We know that the British government rigged the Scottish independence referendum in order to keep their clutches on them as well. But I would have to venture right now that probably at this particular moment, the United States is either the gold medal or silver medal for corruption on the entire planet.
Yeah. Are there any? I mean, there's the globalists who want this one world government move to go forward. Are there any people around the world that are fighting this? I mean, I'd like to think that somewhere in the world there's a bat cave. You know, there's the equivalent of Batman who's out there trying to to fight this. I mean, is there any global movement that's trying to stop this, or is it just left to individuals dotted around the place?
It's more of a leaderless resistance, and that's actually a better way to go, because anybody who stands up to try and be a leader against the corrupt, they instantly become a target. And we've already seen so much wet work in this country over the last 30 years. We know now that Martin Luther King's assassination was a conspiracy because of his influencing the black community to stand opposed to the war in Vietnam. And so, yeah, people who get in the way of what the government or the deep state want to do, bad things happen to them. Just ask Vince Foster. Yes, yeah. Well, certainly, yes, I mean, in the UK, David Kelly, the weapons expert, his death has so many unanswered questions. I mean, and there's one or two other things that are deeply suspicious, but you know, I always used to think that this was a country that was immune to that kind of thing. But sadly, I've come to the conclusion that we're just as bad, or if not quite. Did you say America had the gold medal or the silver medal? Yeah, I think probably the United States has either the silver or the gold medal, and I'm sorry, Britain may have to settle for honorable mention. I think we may have to settle for the bronze medal in that case. Okay. Okay. Good. All right, Mike. Thanks very much. I really appreciate your opinion on that. Good. That's all I had for you today. All right. Well, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go. And the phone lines are now open again, 800-313-9443, and we're going to take another break for commercials. Then when we come on back, more talk about the war zones. Then we're going to get into the economic news and whatever else we're going to talk about today. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm going to back up here to the domestic politics because there's a story that just broke over at the Gateway Pundit where apparently some new Hillary Clinton documents have been released by the State Department. And I guess they were released, and it was hoped everyone were going to be looking at FISA. But the mail's been gone over, and they found a gem that confirms that Hillary Clinton knew that all of her State Department information was being saved on her private server. And the gist of the email is that her BlackBerry died, and she needed to get a new one, and she wanted reassurance from Huma Abedin and these other people that the data would be saved. And the email replied saying it's all saved on your server, your private server. So she knew classified information was on her private server. All right, getting on back to the war zones here. Story coming out of antiwar.com. The annual Munich Security Report this year is entitled To the Brink and Back, and it warns that the European Union and NATO are facing a massively increased risk of an accidental war with Russia. And that's a very real possibility. You have all these soldiers and all these weapons just milling around each other, sneering at each other. The possibility of an accidental discharge triggering an actual battle cannot be ignored. And this report basically is confirming what other reports have already said. NATO-Russia relations are at their worst since the Cold War, and that, of course, is by design. The military-industrial complex wanted the Cold War to come back. And there are not enough safeguards to prevent an accidental conflict. Now, we've been talking about U.S. weapons and how they're really not all they should be for the vast sums of money that go into them. And so there's a story here now about the USS Gerald Ford, which is the latest aircraft carrier. It's the one with all the whiz-bang technology, magnetic catapults, all kinds of stuff, which still having trouble getting it to work. But it's already commissioned. It's out at sea, undergoing sea trials. And apparently the Navy wants to skip one of the major tests that is normally done to a brand new ship, and it's called a shock test. And basically that involves, for any hull, is setting off small underwater charges to basically see how the ship reacts and to basically discover any weaknesses in the design or construction of the vessel. And the Navy wants to skip it because they're already way behind schedule on getting the Gerald R. Ford into combat configuration. And apparently the Navy has omitted shock testing from their fiscal 2019 budget. Now, Trump came into office pledging to return us to a 12-carrier Navy. And with the Gerald R. Ford, we're up to an 11-carrier Navy. The Gerald Ford replaced the USS Enterprise. But the idea that they're rushing these things forward and they're not carrying out the testing, that is very alarming. Now, in theory, being a carrier and surrounded by a carrier screen, carriers are very well protected. They still do get attacked, though. We saw that certainly in World War II. Something else Trump is doing that's a little bit alarming. The White House wants to implement a plan that would make it easier to sell some weapons to foreign partners through a process that eliminates key regulatory and congressional oversight. And basically, this is a proposal that affects the sale of small weapons and ammunition. And the new rules would transfer the oversight for the U.S. to sell weapons like rifles and shotguns and ammunition from the State Department to the Commerce Department. And some critics are saying Commerce Department is not prepared to basically vet potential foreign buyers. But a sale is a sale is a sale is a sale. So here we have a government that's fast-tracking the sale of rifles and shotguns to foreign countries. At the same time, they're trying to block the sale of rifles and shotguns to ordinary American citizens. It's kind of a little weird out there. Now, as you know, Donald Trump came out with this announcement. He wanted a military parade. And the reaction has been negative from a lot of people, including myself. To me, when you hear military parade, that smacks of the old Soviet Union. And it's basically wanting to go on out and thump the chest and say, look how powerful we are militarily. And a lot of people think it's a bad idea because that's not who the United States is supposed to be. But somebody actually did a poll and found out that 89% of Americans do not want Trump to have a military parade anywhere in the country. It's just not our self-image. Okay, let's talk about the economy, and obviously the big story was another rough day on the stock market. The Dow closed down 1,032, and much of that loss was in the final hour of trading, where it was basically hovering around 500, 600 down, and then it just plunged, and it went right off the rails here. I'm looking at the Dow futures, the U.S. stock futures for tomorrow, they're not looking good right now. Standard & Poor's is expected to drop another 2.6%, NASDAQ down 3.3%, and the Dow expected to go down 2.9%, or 723 points down. So this is coming from the pre-market stock trading, and it's an indicator that people are getting scared. They're starting to maybe think that the plunge protection team can't protect them anymore. So we'll see what's going to happen. But if this really is the beginning of the crash, we know who did it. The Wall Street money junkies and a government that basically went along with this idea of deregulation. Remember John McCain champion of deregulation. Oh, the bankers, they can make it all work so smoothly if we just take off the chains. And they did run it very smoothly for their own personal benefit. And they created a stock market that's hideously overvalued. And worse than that, there are the derivatives that are out there. We could see the whole U.S. economy implode. And I guess probably this is a good time for me to mention something. If you are not yet a prepper, you need to be. Because if this is a significant crash, then you can expect supply chains to start failing all over the country. Supermarkets closing, no deliveries of anything. You got to be prepared to live off the grid for as long as you possibly can. Food that can be stored for a long time without refrigeration. And lots of water. Water is the most important thing. Basic first aid kit, extra prescription medication if you're on that medication, spare sets of eyeglasses, and yes, you're probably going to have weapons because if there is a big crash, then all your neighbors who've been laughing at you for being a prepper are going to be pounding on your door. Now, here's an article from Investment Watch blog, and it's saying, who was selling stocks last week before the Monday crash? Who had the inside knowledge? And apparently, according to Bank of America Merrill Lynch analysts cited by Bloomberg, hedge funds were doing a lot of selling during the week before the downturn. And the data was based on account activities by clients of Bank of America Merrill Lynch analysts. Hedge funds disposed of nearly $2 billion in shares that week, or 55% of the total. So did somebody know it was going to happen? Did somebody read the indicators correctly? It's kind of hard to say. Another article over here from ZeroHedge.com. Apparently, China's HNA is starting to liquidate billions of dollars in U.S. real estate. Now, this all gets tangled up with Deutsche Bank and China's largest and most distressed conglomerate, which is HNA Group. And HNA's in serious trouble with liquidity, and apparently they decided their best approach is going to be start selling their U.S. real estate. Now, here's where it gets tricky. If they start selling too much of it, if they put too much of it on the market at the same time, it's going to depress real estate prices. And that, in turn, is going to force a lot of other real estate to be driven underwater with regards to their mortgages. The property will now be worth less than what is owed on the mortgage. So this is going to have a ripple effect. All right, let's take a phone call here from Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, just before I get to it, I was going to say what you just said just now. I've heard, that needs to be underscored because I've heard some things about that. It's always been a worry about what they're going to do with debt. They're going to restructure it, but it's going to make it really hard for people, I think. But this is what I want to talk about. It was nice to listen to that man from England, and I have such fond memories of there. But the Democrats, sometimes I think they protest sometimes when everything is going their way. You were talking about that the other day. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't help thinking, money talks. We have George Soros. We have these dissidents and interlopers, people that are going to other countries, and that you were talking about today, going in there and stirring up trouble. And what do they think they're doing? Well, they're probably getting paid. It's almost like a new job, a new way of making money has been formed here. There's agitators and harassers, even people that call talk shows and push buttons and stuff. They're like, so I wonder how many of them are Soros soldiers, that are really, this is what happened when Donald Trump had his inauguration. They were keeping people from going in the door. They were all being paid. They had there was, confrontations with their little black masks and gloves, and they even had little outfits to distinguish them. And on top of that, we have that money talks aspect of things in this country. Also, we have bad industries. The chemical companies are giving us a problem. The pharmaceuticals are giving us a problem. And I guess we can expect the stock market to just be terribly volatile because American banking is just not on the up and up. And I don't know how it is in England, but I haven't heard about, they don't have a Federal Reserve, do they?
Well, they used to. I mean, back in the 1700s, the Bank of England was a privately owned central bank that issued the public currency as a loan at interest, and it drove the British people into the kind of poverty that you would read about in the works of Charles Dickens, or the kind of conditions people were living in at the time of Jack the Ripper. And then, of course, there was the American Revolution, where we basically kicked out this predatory system of banking, only to be sold back into the same form of slavery 100 years ago by a corrupt Congress and a corrupt president. But the Bank of England, because of some of their investments and loans that were in countries that were breaking free from the British Empire, reached a point of collapse, at which point it was nationalized, and it is now, in fact, under the direct control of the British government. It's acting like their treasury now, rather than a privately operated central bank.
Well, that sounds good. I wish ours dated back to the 18th century and was all over with now, and we had something better going for us, you know. But I just want to make this point things about what's going on in schools and how they're trying to meld all the sexes together, like they don't want people who want kids or can have kids, for that matter, you know. So they'll have a nice neutered workforce that won't give them any trouble. It's just all this stuff that's so much scarier seems like here. And we have a lot to deal with. There's no doubt about it. So I just want to think, I wonder how much of this is backed by cash. You know,
well, there's a lot of cash flowing around. Not all of it is coming from George Soros, but you are correct. Yeah. There are public relations companies that make a big business out of infiltrating people into community meetings, or having phone banks that call up talk shows to try and push a particular agenda, or just make them sound like it's a kooky show that people shouldn't pay attention to. They have people who will ghostwrite and plant stories in corporate newspapers or on websites, all of that stuff. And it is a roaring business. Public relations is a hugely profitable business, and they make a lot of money from the U.S. government and from corporations and from various interested political groups. Again, the Russians approached a public relations firm because they knew that the public relations firm had an in with the Hillary campaign that led to that whole Uranium One deal. So yeah, it is a big business. These people are being paid. We don't often know who is paying them, but every once in a while, some of these rent-a-mob companies, the people will actually say, "Yeah, I was paid to be here."
Yeah, that too. Yeah, those things, and they get sued every so often. These companies, when they get found out that they've got little clandestine ways of getting people to do their dirty work and all that.
Very rarely do they get sued, because, believe it or not, these activities are legal. They're technically considered a form of lobbying, but this so-called grassroots lobbying, the lobbyists are not required by law to identify themselves or who they work for. Lobbyists that approach members of Congress are required to basically say, I am a lobbyist from Bleach, Blash, Blush, and Blosh, and I'm here to talk to you on behalf of this Consolidated Link Corporation regarding this legislation. But these public relations people who go on out to community meetings and call into radio shows, they're actually not required by law to announce that they are, in fact, paid lobbyists.
Drat.
Yes.
Well, we got a lot of work to do.
Yes, we do.
A lot of people we can turn our backs on, I think. But anyway, thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Taking my call.
All right, have a good day. And we're going to switch over to Tom in Indiana. But, Tom, I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break. In fact, we've got about 20 seconds. You can at least say hello and what's on your mind.
Well, I just want to say I made an observation. I wondered what you thought about it. We heard George Bush open his mouth today, and it wasn't until Obama was implicated in the cover-up of this that George Bush came out and opened his mouth to probably protect the pie. I just was trying to get what your thoughts were on that. hadn't heard from George.
Hello?
Aided in this for us.
Okay. Yeah, you were breaking up there just a little bit. All right, well, I'll tell you what. Stay on the line. We got to take a break for commercials, and I'll be right back. And Aloha America, welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Tom in Indiana, and Tom was asking my opinion about comments made by former President George W. Bush. And I presume that you mean the one about Russia meddling in the election, because they are pushing that as hard as they can, and they're bringing out the star power. A former Republican president coming on out and saying, yes, there's pretty clear evidence Russia meddled in the election. Well, my response to that is, Mr. Bush, show us the evidence, because we've had nothing but all of these corrupted former politicians screaming that Russia was to blame for everything, and there's been no proof of it all. And remember, this transcends party politics. They're trying to push the idea that Bush is a Republican, therefore Republicans should listen to him and agree that Russia meddled with the election. That's not where this is going. Remember, the Bush and Clinton families are joined at the hip back in Arkansas back in the mid-1980s, because both of these families were involved in this gun and drug running operation into Nicaragua. And that's what this is really all about, protecting the dark secret, protecting the profits, protecting the CIA's gun and drug running business, which continues to this very day. So they're trying to rely on Bush's star power, and they're basically very scared. They're trying to protect Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has already sent out the message. If she is brought down for rigging the election in 2016, she's going to blow the whistle on everybody. The Clintons are able to blackmail our entire government. So, Tom, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think George Bush is such a hypocrite, having all those soldiers that lost their limbs go out and ride with him and stuff like that, when we know the whole thing was all corrupt. And it just bothers me a lot. And and I agree with you on that.
Okay, well, thank you for the phone call. And we're going to switch to Dave in Illinois. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I appreciate you tremendously in your consistency with your principles. But to continue on that theme about Russia, I think we have to be real careful, because, you know, you've got the left hand and you got the right hand. And we saw the left hand coming, and we blocked the left hand with this Russia collusion thing. The Clintons are being exposed. They're going down. But at the same time, you've got this steady drumbeat from the right, the neocon right, Russia, Russia, Russia. We know Russia attacked us, and we know Russia interfered in our elections. We don't know how, but we know they did. And I want to ask you if you have heard of the have you watched the expose on Bill Browder? He's supposedly the CIA agent who is behind all this Russia propaganda. He's working with the CIA, MI6, and this supposedly goes back to the 80s when they said the wall is going to fall, but we have to take Russia back. You know?
Yes.
Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I haven't seen...
There's a documentary out there.
I haven't seen the documentary, but again, getting on back to this issue, this is a classic case of projection. The CIA has interfered in elections in other countries going back to at least to the end of World War II. And the election rigging is something the CIA does. So it's hypocritical for the U.S. government to make a big stink over Russia wanting to influence our internal politics. But again, nobody's found any evidence about it. They kept trying to sell the idea that Russia had hacked the servers at the DNC. But we know that the forensic data says it was copied off onto a flash drive. It's a big lie. It's a big lie. Do you want to stay on the line, Dave? We got to do a station identification. I'll come right back to you. Okay. Aloha America, welcome back to the show, hour number 3, and we're talking here with Dave in Illinois, and we're talking about this constant drumbeat of Russia is evil, Russia is bad, Russia has got to go. Exactly the same kind of stuff we heard about Osama bin Laden or Saddam Hussein or Bashar al-Assad. They're just playing the same game all over again. And they're out there trying to scream that Russia was interfering in our elections, but nobody has found any evidence to support that. all of the election fraud that was discovered from 2016 was done domestically, and it all points back to the Hillary Clinton campaign. And any real investigation is going to find that, and that's what they're afraid of.
Can I recommend that people check out this film? It's on YouTube. It's called The Browder Effect. It's brow, like eyebrow, DER. And that's about the guy that's been going around making the circuit for years and years. And he's been like the anti-Russia lobbyist for the neocons. And anytime you hear Putin has killed journalists, or Putin has killed all these people, or he poisoned the Alexander Litvinenko or whatever, a lot of that, it traces back to this guy, Bill Browder, who's very mysterious. And this Russian documentary, and I can't prove that it's true, but it's interesting and people should see it so they have both sides. And Dana Rohrabacher tried to show it in the Congress, but they banned him. They banned him from showing it. But this Russian documentary claims to, have proof that Bill Browder was with the CIA. He was working with Khodorkovsky, all the oligarchs, and working with McCain and the Rothschilds and folks like that. And they've been trying to take down Russia. Obviously, Russia's very rich with natural resources, their natural gas, et cetera. And they're the backer of Iran, they're backer of Syria. And so they need to take Russia down to have the hegemony that, they dream about. So I would just recommend people check that out.
Russia and China are two major roadblocks on the way to the one world government, and that's why sooner or later we're going to be at war with those countries, and I don't think the U.S. can win. I went to YouTube. I could not find the specific video you're talking about. If you would email me that URL for that video at YouTube,
I will.
I'll post it at What Really Happened.
I will do it, Mike. And thanks. That's my comment.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open again. Let me take a quick look at... yeah, that's right. Somebody wrote in to say, don't forget, George W. Bush told us all Saddam had nuclear weapons. So the man is a proven liar. All right. Getting on back to Europe and integration, immigration, refugees. Oh, wait a minute. We got another caller. Let's take the call from Alex in Florida. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Not much, Mike. Let's not forget that George Herbert Bush and the CIA put the little girl up on the podium telling us that they were yanking children off incubators in Kuwait. And about 5 years later, it turned out that she had never left the state of California. And that's just far for a force as far as concerned. They want war at any cost.
Yes.
And I also find it sickening that during the debate, when Hillary Clinton was I think she was debating Trump, where she mentioned that she would even use military force for a cyber attack. And we know that she is the one that created the whole Russian dossier stuff. So the fact that she would use military force knowing that she made up the whole Russia collusion is sickening. And I would think that is treason.
No,
and a war crime.
War crime, yes. Treason, technically, no. My view is that lying to people by the leader to trick those people into supporting a war of aggression against another nation which has not expressed any hostility, that is the highest of high crimes and misdemeanors. And we certainly saw it with the run-up to Iraq and the claim about weapons of mass destruction. We saw it in the run-up to the constant attacks on Syria with claims that Assad was gassing his own people, which really is between Assad and the Syrian people, even if it actually had happened. But again, they're selling us another war. And it's only a matter of time before we're going to find ourselves at war with Russia and China. And they are nuclear powers with very capable weapon systems. And I don't think the U.S. can win.
Yeah.
And I think the people who are behind this war don't really care, because their goal is to sell more weapons and skedaddle with their money. And the bankers, they're perfectly happy to see this country destroyed, because they will loan us the money with which to rebuild at interest.
Yes. I think it is, I don't know what it is, but when you try to rig an election of a democracy, the biggest democracy in the world, supposedly the United States, I don't know if that's treason or what it is, but it should be punishable.
Well,
that is wrong.
It is. There are laws against election fraud. They are simply not being enforced, because everybody who's in power now is the beneficiary of election fraud. They don't want the system to change. That's why there was so much resistance to Donald Trump's Election Integrity Commission. And Trump finally had to shut it on down, because they were getting nowhere, because all of these state election commissions just stonewalled it and said, you don't get to come on in here and take a look at what we're doing.
Yeah, I believe that the world will stand up and outcry against us if we try to go to any other wars. I don't see us just doing it over the will of the earth, humanity. I don't see humanity saying that, oh yeah, we believe the United States in this case, even though they've lied to us time in and time out. Every second they get to try to go to war, they have lied to us.
Yes.
And we've killed 2 million people on the war on terror so far. And we've spent $9 trillion, or they project it will be $9 trillion. And it's like Trump said, that would have rebuilt our total infrastructure 3 times.
Yes.
It's a disgrace that we're even having to listen to that George Herbert Bush war criminal. The fact that he gets the stage is disgusting.
Well, this is the younger Bush, George W. Bush, and you're talking about his father, George Herbert Walker Bush.
That's right. Well, both of them.
Well, yeah, both of them.
Questioned. That's right. They both need to be questioned. On Mr. Herbert Bush needs to be questioned on where he was when Kennedy was assassinated.
Oh, they got a photo of him.
How come you let that?
They got a photo of him in Dealey Plaza.
That's right. Wasn't he with bin Laden's at the Ritz-Carlton in New York on 9/11?
I don't know about that story, but I do know that George W. Bush was business partners with Osama bin Laden's older brother, Salam bin Laden, in a failed energy company. And then Salam bin Laden died in a small plane crash, which seems to happen an awful lot. But the fact of the matter is, the bin Laden family are majorly into construction in the Mideast, and they get a lot of U.S. government contracts. And Osama bin Laden, when he was growing up, he wasn't this religious fanatic. In fact, he was a playboy. He had a lot of money, sports cars, and somehow he got tapped to be turned into this supposed leader of Al-Qaeda. And he was going to play at being, this super villain. And I remember seeing a video, or rather a film that was shot of him. They were trying to make a propaganda movie about how terrible he was, and they gave him an AK-47, and he didn't know how to handle it. And in fact, it actually partly disassembled when he was holding it, and they had to come back in and fix it and put it together. Anyway.
Hey, Michael, I have one more thing.
You got to make it quick. We got a lot of phone calls.
Did you see the video where Bill Clinton was asked about 9/11 from a 9/11 truther at some one of his speeches, and he told that truther, "How dare you question this government?" And I want to tell Bill Clinton, I want to ask him, how dare you not expect us to question everything that comes from this government?
Yes.
Everything. Okay, thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And first of all, we're going to do a shout-out to our honor affiliates who have rejoined our network, and we're going to go back to the phone lines. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Alex, are you there? Okay, then let's switch over to Jeff in Georgia. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good to talk to you, Michael. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Hello. Oh, okay. Michael, I'm predicting that when they get to the bottom of this Russian hoax, you're going to see that you have an international Jewish cartel that's using the Clintons and others as puppets, as they have done for decades. And Michael...
Okay, I'm going to cut in right now. Okay. Occam's razor applies. The simplest explanation is usually going to be the correct one. And what we're seeing here is that Hillary Clinton and the DNC tried to steal the election for Hillary in 2016, and they lost. They don't have the power to keep things covered up, and allegations of election fraud keep popping up. So what are they going to do? They're going to blame Russia for it. They're trying to put the blame off on somebody who's on the other side of the world, knowing that most of us could not actually go on over and check it out for ourselves. It's the same dirty trick that Ramses played on his own people with regard to the Hittites. Just tell a big lie, knowing ordinary people can't get up there and check it out for themselves. So that's basically the explanation. And it's very common for people who are on the verge of being caught committing a crime or a scandal to immediately accuse their opposition of it. And so that's where this whole thing about Trump colluding with Russia came from, because it was Hillary who was colluding with Russia over the Uranium One deal. And that should be very obvious at this point. And we don't need to imagine that there's some super committee that's over this thing. Let's just focus on what we know that's actually provable at this point.
Hey, Michael. Remember, okay, Trump, when Trump was campaigning, Russia, we were going to get along with Russia. The oligarchy will not let that happen, Michael. And I'll tell you why. I mean, you know this better than I do. In 1999, Putin comes to power. He replaces Yeltsin. In a few years, he throws Khodorkovsky in prison, who was the richest man in Russia, who was Jewish. And he went after the oligarchs for stealing Russian resources. He was on the oligarchy hit list. They will not let us shake hands with Putin. He's Christian, we're Christian, and we need to be sitting down and getting the whole nuclear thing off the table. We need to be working together. We're not allowed to. This oligarchy, I know full well. I've spent years studying Kennedy. They were at the center of the Kennedy planning and the cover-up in his coup d'etat.
Okay.
They've done many terrible things. And Michael, one.
I'm sorry, Jeff, you're coming across as obsessed on just one piece of the picture. Okay, because one of the reasons that relations with Russia have broken down is the military-industrial complex. They wanted the Cold War back because it means more money, more rapid promotion. The U.S. government wanted the Cold War back. They wanted to have an enemy that would scare the American people and ensure our obedience. Then you had the weapons makers, obviously. They wanted the Cold War back. And then the other problem is that Putin took direct government control of Russia's private central bank in order to manage the public currency as a public utility. And that was pretty much the moment when Putin went to the very top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list, because you don't cross those private central bankers. Okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for the phone call, Jeff. We're going to let you go and switch over to Tony in Texas. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Professor Rivero.
Thank you.
Hey, I've been listening to you for some time now, but excuse if you hear any noise in the background. I'm in transportation.
Okay.
But what I want to ask is that I'm trying to explain what's the best way to explain to one individual that, like, for instance, Iran, they exchange goods, using gold. They don't fall up under the fiat currency. And the one thing that out of their mouth is when I tell them, hey, interest is bad, and then what they say is, then how do they make money? And so I'm just trying trying to get individuals to wrap their brain around that if there is interest, then you are not a slave to the person who loaned you that loan.
Well, that's one way to put it, but I think you need to differentiate between interest that's on a normal loan for, say, a mortgage or a car or something like that, versus having a private central bank that is issuing all of the public currency as a loan at interest. Because that is not this, and remind them, that's not the system that we had when we started as a country. In fact, the revolution was fought to free the American colonists from the slavery of the Bank of England, which was playing the same scam. They would print up these banknotes, these pieces of ink and paper. King George III said, this is the only currency you're allowed to use, and you have to borrow it from the Bank of England at interest. And it resulted in extreme poverty for the colonies, as it did for the ordinary people of Great Britain, and immense wealth for the Bank of England. And it's a scam. This country was started with having money that represented value. And today we're living under a system where the currency represents debt and enslavement to the private central bank.
So in essence, by them printing up this little piece of paper, they created control over the masses because they pretty much expunged bartering.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That'll work. I'll explain it to them in that essence. So.
Yeah, just remind them that what we have as a banking system today is identical to the one we fought the revolution to break free of, only to be sold back into that same system of slavery by a corrupted Congress and a corrupt president 100 years ago.
All right. I appreciate it.
Good luck.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tony. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open again. Now, here's an interesting story, and this goes back to the caller from England who was talking about how corrupt their politicians are in trying to force Britain to reverse on Brexit, or to have a Brexit that's a Brexit in name only. And this article kind of confirms that. This is reported in the Express in Great Britain, and basically it says Brussels has voted to impose Berlin time on the UK and scrap British summertime even after Brexit. Well, following Brexit, Brussels will have nothing to say about it. But again, they're trying to just add these shackles and impediments. And again, it's all about the globalists. The New World Order, one world government. And it's got all these very powerful people who are all supporting the idea because secretly they dream that one day their rear end is going to sit there on that golden throne of planet Earth. And it will be terrible for those of us who are not inside that little clique. Apparently, there are major protests in Germany against refugees and immigrants who are now being perceived as taking over the country. Remember yesterday we were talking about Venice, Italy is now the majority population are immigrants. And I can understand how the Germans and the Italians are feeling about this, and that partly because I've been there. And I worked there. And so when we come back from this commercial break, I'm going to share a little bit of an insight with you. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about this story, how there are mass protests in Germany against refugees and immigrants taking over the country. Now, I got to spend some time in both Italy and Germany back in the 1980s as part of my work with Robert Abel and Associates. And I remember that everybody there was intensely proud of their country. They were intensely proud of the historical buildings, the icons that were there. Milan, Italy, of course, it was the Duomo, and the Last Supper. I got to see that one. Up in Munich was the Residence Museum, and all of these things. And these people have grown up with all of this. This is part of their identity, is the world they have known growing up. And now they're being driven out of it. And that's why there is such hostility. So just take for a moment and think about something that was meaningful to you in your youth. Doesn't have to be something that you owned. Just something that gave you a sense of pride. For people in New York, of course, that's going to be the Statue of Liberty, for example. And then imagine all of a sudden that a flood of refugees has come on in and made your neighborhood so dangerous that you feel compelled to move away from all you have known growing up. How would you feel about that? I know I wouldn't be very happy with that at all. I instinctively put down roots. I hate every time I have to move. So just imagine that for a moment. If you're in Los Angeles, the Hollywood sign, for example, or the Capitol Records building. Imagine refugees and illegal immigrants coming on in and making the neighborhood so dangerous and undesirable you're forced to leave and go elsewhere. Wouldn't you miss all of that you had known? I mean, I wasn't, well, in a way, I was sort of driven out of Los Angeles over that Vince Foster affair. And I know it's not a pleasant place now, but there are still things that I identify with and miss, like the Magic Castle. That's where all this friction and hostility is coming from. And you would feel exactly the same way. Now, apparently, and this goes back to something else I was saying about the growing backlash against the New World Order. Article out of Breitbart. Record support for conservative, pro-sovereignty governments in Hungary and Poland. And basically, the polls are showing that the conservative, anti-mass migration governing parties of Hungary and Poland are getting record support. And it's an indication that European Union unity on immigration is crumbling, which is why Brussels is now threatening military force. You will take refugees or we will invade you. Nearly 3/4 of Polish voters believe President Andrzej Duda is performing well. A separate survey conducted by Ibris said the Poland's ruling Law and Justice Party would pick up 47% of the vote if parliamentary elections were held this week, way ahead of its rival Civic Platform, which is a pro-EU, pro-migration party. People are getting tired of all this stuff. They're sick and tired of all of this stuff. And here we are. Here's the actual story. This is over at newswars.com. The European Union is threatening force against countries refusing migrants. And this is according to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. So Orban has posted a short video on Facebook summarizing the threat leveled by Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel at Hungary and allied governments. So that's how scared the globalists are that their globalist dream is falling apart. They're ready to basically start a war to conquer the world. And I'm sure that's a big part of what's going on with U.S. militarism. Our leaders who are globalists are using our military to go on out and basically exert control over the rest of the world on behalf of Soros and the one world government people. Remember, we had that story that came on out the other day where there are U.S. special forces in 3/4 of all the nations on planet Earth. Now, we don't know how many. It could just be a handful. But it is very telling just how far the U.S. military reach has gone. And it's also a reminder, we don't know everything that this government is doing. Remember, it caught everybody by surprise that we had forces in Niger. Anyway, this donation by Soros, £400,000 to a campaign to stop Brexit, has resulted in a backlash. And they're basically members of parliament are telling Soros to butt out. That it's none of his business what's going on in Brexit. And they're absolutely correct. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about immigration, migration, and apparently there is yet another reason for people in London to be angry It's come on out that there are now neighborhoods. This was supposed to be kept secret, but it's been exposed by the Daily Star and Rebel Media. And basically what it is, these are neighborhoods where the government of London has said that these properties cannot be offered to any British people. They are reserved for Muslim occupants. And basically we have a government that is discriminating against its own people. And this has provoked a very angry reaction. As well it should. Now, there was this German feminist, and hang on a second, I didn't copy her name over to the talking points. I'll get it up here in just a sec. Anyway, she's a German feminist social justice warrior, and originally she was fully on board with immigration and open borders. Her name is Rebecca Sommer, and now she's admitting she got it wrong. And Germany's been wrecked. She says it's too late to save Germany, and she's getting ready to leave the country. It's also a little too late for any kind of an apology. If you'd actually thought all of this through, instead of just getting caught up in the jingoism and this liberal ideology, if you'd thought it all through, you could have predicted, as we did, what was really going to happen when the borders came down. Now, the other thing that George W. Bush said today, aside from Russia's interference in the 2016 election, for which there is no proof whatsoever. Meanwhile, there's tons of proof Hillary was cheating. We need to keep our eye on that. The other thing he said is regarding immigrants, we ought to say thank you and welcome them. And basically he was saying that the U.S. needs to welcome immigrants and thank them for doing the jobs that Americans won't do. Well, that is one of the biggest lies coming from the open borders people. There are almost 100 million Americans willing and able to work who haven't found a job in months, if not years. They're willing to work. They're willing to be given the jobs. There's no such thing as jobs that Americans won't do. The reason they want the immigrants is twofold. The immigrants are willing to work for less. The illegal immigrants, they're not paying any taxes, so that costs the employers less. You need to remember that when you work for a company, there's not only the withholding that's being taken out of your check. The employer pays a tax for the government's permission to hire you. And between the employer's tax and what the withholding in your check, if you add them together, you find out government actually makes more money off your labor than you do. But that's another issue entirely. But for George W. Bush to say we welcome the immigrants because they're going to do the jobs Americans won't do, I'd like to hear an example of what he means by that. What is a job that immigrants will do that Americans won't do? I think for decent wages and salaries, Americans will pretty much do anything. Americans have cleaned out the sewers and storm drains. Americans will mow the lawn. I remember when I was a kid, mowing the neighbor's lawn was a good way to earn money during the summer. Now you need a city license to do that. Now up in Sweden, there's a 55-year-old man who was hit with a fine of about $1,200 US for committing a crime of opinion. And he wrote on Facebook that the Muslims, refugees, migrants, account for a lot of gang crime in Sweden and other violent stuff like rapes. Now, what he said is factually true. But Sweden, which has become this liberal paradise with a liberal government, and there are bike lanes everywhere, and even Jeremy Clarkson was making fun of them for this stuff. But now they have come out with this idea, a crime of opinion. It is now a crime in Sweden to have an opinion, and apparently to state what is obvious to everybody. Sweden has become the rape capital of Europe. Now, over in Denmark, they've come up with what I think ought to be seen as a workable solution to this migration problem. And what they have is a plan that changes the way refugees come to Denmark. And what they're going to do is they're not going to have the open borders anymore. What they're going to do is they're going to set up reception centers outside Europe, probably down in Africa, where those who are seeking refugee status in Denmark will live while their case is examined. And they will not be allowed into Denmark unless they are legally granted refugee status. Now, I can already imagine the globalists in Brussels are going to scream bloody murder over this, because their model is just let everybody in and then do the paperwork to process the refugees. And those who don't meet the qualifications will eventually somehow be convinced to go back home. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Dave in Missouri, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Hello? Dave, are you there? We seem to have a bad phone connection.
I will call back in.
All right, please do. Please do. Hopefully we'll get it right. Apparently, over in Greece, there was what was supposed to be a small protest, and apparently it's basically turned into mass rioting. It's already being described as a possible revolution. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Greeks have voted in government after government after government that has promised to free them from the economic slavery of the European Central Bank, and the new politicians will get in, and it just as was the case with Donald Trump, somehow they are convinced to just let things go on the way they've been going on. And so the Greeks are out there, huge crowds, and a lot of people are already drawing parallels to the 1843 revolution. All right, looks like Dave is back. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. Is this any better?
Yeah, much better.
Very good, very good. You know, Mike, you may have covered this, but you know, I'm one of those late listeners, and but it just, we were all waiting. We knew whenever the House Intelligence Committee report was going to drop, the memo, we knew to expect some diversion to get all of the talking heads on the MSN off of anything other than the memo. And then the market just takes a nosedive. And, you know, you've lived long enough to know as well as I do, there are no coincidences when it comes to things like that. And so, you know, would they destroy trillions of dollars of wealth in the economy to change the topic when their hands caught the cookie jar? Well, they would do anything to do that. And so I don't know that we could ever prove it. But to me, you know, I mean, I was kind of I was worried about the Super Bowl or any other major false flag. But to me, what we're seeing in the markets is nothing more than just a change of course to get the MSM off of the memo, off of the reality of the fact that the Democrats did absolutely commit frauds and crimes of treason against this nation, not just to manipulate an election, but to ultimately maintain control of the power structure so that they could get by with all of the crimes that they had committed, and no one would ever hold them to account. And you know, it's encouraging to me, Mike, because I mean, you're almost, you know, you're coming along, and I'm with you in the back seat on this. I can't ever see Hillary actually paying the price of her crimes, but man, I mean, to see us inching closer and to see that reality become an envisionable prospect, whereas it's always been just over the rainbow stuff, we can expect the power players to do anything. So that they're going to crash the market, sure they are. And man, you said something about Sweden, breaks my heart. You know, I hate to just say white Christian civilization has been a boom to mankind in technology, because we've also done very evil things. But we have the civility and culture that come from Christian community, okay? I mean, Christian ethics, however you want to define it, love your neighbor as yourself, treat folks like you want to be treated. Better to be just than to be a lying fraud piece of garbage, because your kids are going to grow up in your image.
Dave,
that kind of stuff, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Are you coming to some kind of a conclusion or point? Because it sounds like
I am. To see countries like Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, bastions of Christian civilization just overrun by these hordes with no stops in place to protect civility. To me, that is probably the greatest crime against humanity that we've seen in our lifetime. And I just wanted to get your take on, of course, I'm sure you agree, they will crash the markets. They'll do anything to try to change the conversation off of them caught with their hand in a cookie jar, that they need to be held criminally responsible for their crimes against humanity, treason against the United States. And so anything is likely to happen at this juncture. I just hadn't heard you make that point, but I'm sure you probably did.
I'm not making that point because I don't agree with you. I don't think that this market was being deliberately taken down, because the damage from it isn't just going to hit the American people. Remember, all these people in government, all these members of Congress, they all have stock portfolios. If they try and deliberately take on the market, they're literally making themselves poorer, and that's something politicians don't like to do. I think
they've also got other golden parachutes and other angles.
Okay, Dave. Okay, you got to listen to me for here a little bit. I suspect the distraction from the FISA memo was supposed to be the derailment of that train full of Republican lawmakers on their way to their retreat. It didn't work on out, and I think that's why they're kind of panicking now. But we've been aware of how fragile the stock market is, for quite a long time. Experts have been saying a correction is overdue, and it looks like it's happening now. I think the problem is they couldn't stop it from happening.
Well, and to me, I really did not see Trump as a fool, but the more he touted the rise of the market, knowing that it was a bubble, you almost got to wonder, where's this boy been for 70 years? He's watched the markets. He's seen these bubbles play out. Why are you going to beat your chest on something that you know is going to pop at any minute? And then they're going to use your words against you. So, to me, that was a very foolish thing, was for him to pin, his economic genius on the markets, because the markets have never reflected the best interest of the American worker. Usually quite the opposite. It's the shareholder. And so, that's what the markets reflect. So, for him to say, we're creating X number of jobs, or, we're adding this to the economy, when it's just stock market value gain, that would be the last thing I would point at as a president who had ever seen a market cycle. But that's just kind of my take on it. Where has he been for 70 years if he didn't see a bubble coming?
Okay, Dave, sorry to cut you off. You made your point. I've given you my perspective on it. We're running out of time here, so I'm going to have to say thank you and let you go and get on back to the news here. And again, I want to caution everybody, Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is generally the correct one. And I know that there is something very tempting about trying to work out a fabulously complex theory of conspiracy and power play, and there's probably a lot of material out there that would support that kind of thinking. But generally, go for the simplest explanation and go for what we know is a fact and can document now, and just proceed on that. And the speculation serves no good unless you actually have evidence to basically back it up here. I'm sorry to hesitate, but I got something. Okay, hang on a second. And apparently one of my advertisers is playing bad again here. Okay, we got a caller, Joe in Rhode Island. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. The new sanctions by the United States of North Korea. Do you have any information on that? And if you do, what kind of pressure would this be in the region?
Well, it depends on how many other countries are willing to go along with the sanctions. Right now, we don't know exactly what they're going to be. We just have Mike Pence over there on the Korean Peninsula talking tough and insisting we're going to hit North Korea with more sanctions. We're not going to talk with them. They've gone back to this attitude of North Korea will do what we say or we will do bad things to them. I kind of liked it better when North and South Korea were talking about reunification, and obviously that's something the United States does not want to have happen.
Okay. The other thing is, Mike, 4 states, you reported a while back, I believe, if I got this right, 4 states are being investigated by the Department of Justice of the Department of Transportation in those states.
Yes.
Did I get that right? Any developments on that?
I haven't heard any developments on that right now. I haven't really been looking. I'm very much focused on what's coming out about the FISA memo and the collapse of the Russian collusion, Trump-Russia collusion claim. And I'm still wondering why Mueller still has a job. He's spent $10 million and he's come up with absolutely zip. He's had a few indictments that are completely unconnected with the Trump campaign.
It sounds like the tables have flipped.
Well, we certainly hope so.
No,
I mean, it's been a long time coming, and right now is not a time for us to pull back and relax. Now's the time to push as hard as we've ever pushed in terms of getting this stuff out there to the American people, because clearly the corporate media doesn't want to pay attention to this, and now they're going to have a week of the Olympics to hide all of this stuff behind.
That's right. Hey, let it all come out, Mike.
I agree. We're going to have to let you go. We're going to have to let you go. We've got to do a commercial break. I got 2 more calls that we're going to try and fit in our last segment, so we'll be right back. And Aloha America, welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today. We're going to try and fit in 2 calls here. Lenny in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, the immigration of the forced immigration on the Europeans that you were speaking about earlier. Like you, I too have traveled and worked there. And I can say that those people treated me with the greatest of respect simply because I gave the same respect to them.
Yes.
And like you, I can appreciate their culture. That's why I went, was to experience a different culture and appreciate another people's culture, okay, and not have to deal with someone's an alien culture imposed upon them. So I can imagine everything that you're saying, and it's been Greece, it's been Italy, it's been Chechnya, it's been Germany. And I truly enjoyed it. They respected me. I respected them. And we came away with a healthy respect for one another. But with that being said, I want you to imagine one more thing. Imagine that this happened to you and you were a Palestinian. And you want to leave, but you can't.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
All right. Well, interesting perspective here. And Lenny, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We got time for one more phone call from Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I like that last call, Lenny. I heard him a few other times, and I keep calling in. Anyway, regarding the robot police cars that are being deployed experimentally right now. So what it is, it's a self-driving car that can pull you over and give you a speeding ticket. And I just want to say there's an ulterior motive here, because it would be a lot easier just to hook up your odometer and ticket you when your odometer gets too fast. It'd be way cheaper, way safer, way easier. That's not what they're trying to do here. What they're trying to do is they're slowly rolling out the complete enslavement of humanity by robots for probably an eventual extermination event to get us down to that 500 million. It's so dangerous what's going on here, how we're handing our entire society over to these machines.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you for economic reasons. I don't think they need a robot police force if they're planning a major depopulation effort, because all they need to do is come up with some designer illness where they say this is going to kill off 90% of the population, like Ebola Mayinga. And
but they still need slaves. They're always going to need slaves, no matter what.
The robots are the slaves. The robots are the slaves.
Just give me a chance here. They're going to need slaves no matter what. Right now, the humans are the slaves. They want to transfer us over to the robots being the slaves, but they still need the humans just for a little bit longer to finish building the robot infrastructure. And they're already halfway there, and they're already phasing this out. That's why our sperm counts are down and our illnesses are up. Anyway, so just...
Okay, we're at the end of the show. We're at the end of the show, Mateus. Thank you very much. I disagree, obviously, with this idea. The reason for sperm counts are down is bad food, toxins in our food. Anyway, we got to sign off now for Mateus here. It's the end of our show, and obviously I'd like you to stay for John Stadmiller's program. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. We'll be back here tomorrow on Republic Broadcasting. Meanwhile, call to Rivero's Rangers. Keep saving up all this information about the FISA memo, the Grassley memo, the fact that there's a criminal complaint against some of these people starting to happen. And just keep putting it in front of everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.